Oops, there we Okay, now we're recording it. Hey, welcome, good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
Okay, sorry. I'm 50 minutes into it. Sorry, I just remembered to hit record, but here we go. So anyway, just as a quick recap, we went through what we did at the beginning of the class. We talked about what's important. Why do we focus on the learnings from the first wave and the second wave of e-commerce, and then what business strategy models do we use and why do we use them? That's kind of where we were right now. With Zimina, we earlier were talking through the technology, infrastructure. Why is it important to understand devices and networks and routers and servers, and then the next layer up in terms of like operating systems and application layers. Why is it important to know whether somebody's a iOS user versus an Android user? What kind of browsers do they use? Who cares? And actually, it's very important because we have other protocols, other languages that we use to develop applications and web-based content. We're focusing in chapter 2 on HTML and XML, hypertext markup language, and that's the language of the content of the internet so that it can be presented via a browser. And depending on your browser, you might or might not be able to see some content because sometimes content is customized for a particular browser, and then you might have problems. So therefore, that's why it's important to know the different technologies, because if you're creating e-commerce or investing in e-commerce initiatives, you need to make sure that your entire stack of your solution supports the existing environment in which your customers are operating. So as an example, if 90% of your customers are iPhone users and running iOS or MacBook Pro users, then you probably would lean almost all of your development energy and resources, time and money into making sure that whatever you provide e-commerce solutions were optimized for that environment. And you would also need to know what kind of internet connection capability they had to make sure that whatever content you were delivering or services you were delivering over the network were supported by the networks that they have. If you have customers with 3G or worse 2G connectivity, then they're completely going to be impacted by the size, the heaviness of your content. So you're probably not going to be streaming how-to videos to them, hopefully. And even the content, even an image, you would try to minimize the pixel count on that image. You know, you probably have seen this before. If you save an HD quality movie, it could be 1.5 gigabytes. If you you can save it maybe in a 720, a different format with a smaller capacity requirement, and then therefore the network requirements to be able to stream that content, even a picture, same thing with a picture. You have choices as to the capacity requirements for that, and that completely impacts your user's experience. And if a user has crappy experience, they're not going to come use your application, or if they have a choice, that is, to go somewhere else, they'll go somewhere else. You guys have all done that. You'll click on something, and if it's crappy, if it's you get this updating, progress circle. You do that for like a couple seconds, and all of us in the world now, most of us have ADHD when it comes to that, and we have no patience, and boom, we're off to the next thing. If Netflix doesn't do it right, then boom, I'm off to YouTube. If YouTube doesn't right, then boom, I'm off to HBO Go or whatever. I'm going somewhere else, or some Russian site that's got all of the pirated movies, whatever. So point is that it's very important to know what the infrastructure is. Okay, so that was the first 45 minutes or 50 minutes. So now everybody's caught up. So back to Benjamin and I were just talking about the necessity to know that in the first wave and the second wave, in the first wave, we weren't making money. And then by the second wave, we're like, hey, we're in business. There needs to be a business model here. And that's where Michael Porter and his value chain of activities, and combined with SWOT analysis, and these are just my choices, it's in the book too, but I totally agree. There are many other modeling tools, but these are really good ones that help us get our head around what are we doing? And relative to competition or opportunity, how am I doing? I'm positioning myself. And just with these two simple modeling tools, I can really get a pretty good idea. And you're going to do this in your projects. How do I leverage those to to take advantage of my position in the market? And as Benjamin was just saying before I hit the record button, if you focus on your strengths and look for more opportunities, you can invest in that, lean into your strengths. Or if it's a weakness, you can invest in shoring up that weakness so you're not at risk by being caught off guard or losing some business via a threat that might exist that could take advantage of your weakness. So this is, he said this in those terms, and this is very clever. This is exactly the relationship between each of those things that helps you focus your attention on what e-commerce initiatives are most valuable, most important in terms of prioritizing. And hopefully you guys got this. If you've done your homework assignment, you hopefully have started the wheels turning in your head when you were thinking about, well, what could I go and do? And the what has got to be preceded by the why. Why am I doing this? And when you jump into the SWOT analysis, it really helps to highlight, because sometimes people, they come up with what's all the time. They're like, hey, this is a good idea. But the first question out of any clever executive is, well, why would I do that? And it had better be mapped directly to R minus E equals P. Remember that? Revenue minus expenses equals profit. So no matter what initiative it is, tell me how it's going to increase my revenues and or decrease my expenses. Because I don't care about that's what I get paid to do. I don't care about anything except the things that do that, because I'm in business for that. And I said before, it could be a nonprofit, it could be Mother Teresa, and Mother Teresa's objective is, how do I save lives? So how much money do I have to spend, and how many lives do I get to save if I spend that money? So it's not always revenue, and then profit is simply people breathing and above ground. So, but the point is the same. We need to know exactly why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, so we're caught up. I believe the things that would be on the quiz would be things related to that chapter 1 that I talked about. One thing I did not mention is the general categories of e-commerce. There were 3, and I'm not going to give you the answer, but they were in bubbles. If Benjamin or Zimana want to say what they are, you're welcome to, but everyone knows how to read. Hopefully they've been reading the book a bit and paying attention to the discussions. But this is just generally how we categorize them. And the major point about the categories is to wake you up and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know how big those bubbles were relative to the other bubbles. Because when you think about, and I'll give you one piece of it, when you think about business to consumer, B2C, against other things, you're probably like, wow, I didn't know that. And now I can consider why, if I go into an existing business, why, if I am an e-commerce specialist, or I'm developing my skills down that path, I can have a huge impact on the value of an organization. All right. let me think about something else. I'm scanning through your quiz. Yeah, I think that's good enough for now. What do you, give me some more questions if you have them.
I think I don't have any questions right now.
No? Okay. I'm going to go over to chapter. These are the slides from the other chapter. This is chapter 3 or 4, I think. So this is where I got into more detail on the web, the servers that provide all the different services behind. But I've described them already, so I don't think I need to go through them. But if you look at this slide as an example, again, this is quite old, but it doesn't matter. This is why I don't ask anyone to go buy new books, because if I bought the latest version of the book, it would still be outdated as soon as it showed up in the library. But this model is exactly how things are today. Just update the pretty pictures. This concept of dynamic and static, of course, is important. This is another version, I guess, of that previous slide from the last chapter. And this is where the client is talking to a server over the internet, and it's how is that communicating? I haven't focused on HTTP in the class. We'll talk about this more later, but it is another protocol. It's the protocol for web servers that manages the transportation of the content. It sits on top of TCP/IP, which is how the bits and the bytes are managed, but the HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is what it stands for, is yet the protocol of handling web content back and forth. I'll give you an example of how you would know that. If you go to your bank and you type in your bank, so Raiffeisen.cz or whatever, and hit the enter key and it says log in, do you know what the prefix is on that login that's slightly different than HTTP? It's got one more letter.
S, HTTPS.
Right. And why is that? What's the S stand for?
Security. Security.
Exactly. And so what does that tell you?
That the web is safe and that your login is it's okay to log in and everything because it's secured. There's some security service or server is secured.
Right. Keep going. What's happening? Do you know how it's secure?
Not exactly sure, but I guess that if I believe that if you have HTTP and you're, for example, on a free Wi-Fi, without a password, nobody can really access the website still, even through the free Wi-Fi or free internet without password. So they can't. The website is secured by itself, not by the password that you have for your router or wherever. That's my assumption.
I'm not sure if I understand that. By the way, I think you're going down a path that is different and the same. If I'm at home and I have a password on my router for my Wi-Fi, then I have a secure connection between my device and my router.
then the security could stand for that it's encrypted data, right?
Bingo. That's the answer to the question.
Because I learned in IT, I had IT or computer science in my high school. And we also learned that like when you, for example, when you're in like on an airport or somewhere and there's like a free Wi-Fi, you know, you can be, well, I don't say easily, but you can be hacked a lot easier than through a WPA2 password Wi-Fi. And if you attempt to go to, you know, a website, you will rather not go really through the HTTP. You will rather go to HTTPS because it is encrypted by itself. It won't.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And both of those are right. The only thing you said that's not right is that, and I think you just didn't know, so you said, I'm not sure. It's actually terribly easy to, there's a term, it's called shadowing. I can shadow your IP address. You could go to the Google in the internet, and you don't have to go to the dark web, and you could find software that allows you to shadow an IP address. Now, I told you earlier that every device on the internet has to have a unique IP address. I mean, has to, right? Because the server or the other device that's coming through the network called the internet is looking around for only one IP address in which to send the content. And when you're sending stuff, it's only taking that stuff from a particular IP address. So, I mean, the technology is not that complicated. I can create, it's not typically not ethical, but I can download software that allows my device to, it's called sniffing. I can sniff the network around, identify the unique IP address of a unique device, and then mimic that IP address, launch a browser, and then they will still get their content, but now I will get that content because the internet doesn't know any better. It thinks I'm them. And then from this basic concept, you can see how those devilish little bastards around the world take advantage of people who don't pay attention to security. And so that's in terms of the Wi-Fi connectivity. When you're in like a Starbucks or a coffee shop or the airport, and you're totally right, but but the only thing is a little off is that it's easy, and which means the rest of us have to be much more aware. I mean, it's an awareness like, do I lock my apartment, my flat door when I leave? Yeah, I do, because I hear on the news or the radio that so-and-so, you know, in this neighborhood, we had 3 break-ins. You know, this was a long time ago, right? That there would be people who would keep their doors open, but clearly over some time, the community generally understands that you lock your door. And we, as technology people, users, which is everybody, have to have that same level of understanding and vigilance when we use our computers. We should always and only do business transactions with web sites, web pages that have encryption, HTTPS. Otherwise, we run the liability that all of the things that we type in, to include our IDs, our passcodes, or anything else, is public information. And I've just shared that with all the bad guys, because the good guys don't care. They're not looking around for your stuff. It's the bad guys, so they can steal your identity or whatever. Have ransomware downloaded and dumped on your laptop while you're not paying attention. So there are all these considerations around security that are related to HTTPS, that now that you know better, if you were ever to implement a e-commerce solution, and there was a need for security, not everything needs to be secure. You know, if I have a catalog of products that, you know, I don't care, it doesn't have to be a secure site. If there's an incremental amount of investment that needs to be made to secure that content, then I probably wouldn't do it if it's not important. The databases that deliver that content to that web page are certainly, it better be secure and protected. But to the web page that's being delivered to that end user, that security is not important. So it's not always everything, because there's a layer of processing that increases the, I'll call it a price, the transactional rate of which things happen that are affected by encryption. As you can imagine, there's a, I mean, because if I'm having to have the computer processing power to encrypt, then I have to have the compute capacity on the other end to decrypt. And so that's yet another activity that could slow down response time. And as we talked about, related to capacity planning, throughput, end user experience, the guys, the architects and the engineers who worry about things like this, that actually becomes surprisingly quite meaningful. Over time, as we get to 5G and all of our devices are at that same level of performance, that becomes non-issue because we have so much capacity in the system that doing this extra workload is nothing. All right, what other questions you got? That's a good slide. You should know what those things mean. Okay, I don't know if I'm gonna have anything else to say. If you have more other questions or maybe about your projects or.
I think it's fine.
Is this helpful?
Yes, to go over it again was helpful, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Benjamin?
How long is the quiz approximately going to be? Like in terms of how many questions or how much time?
I would only think like it's really a test of your knowledge of a few things. So probably maybe four or five, and it should be like 20 or 30 minutes. I don't want it to be very long. It's really a representative test, what the midterm is going to be like. So, but without such a huge penalty if you screw it up. So what it tends to be is about, just my experience is about half of you fail it and go, oh wow, I guess he really wanted us to pay attention to that. And then and then from that from that wake up call, then about 80% do well on the midterm. So it's a cheap way for me to show you what I'm about to do in week 8 or 9. Cheap in terms of the expense to you.
And I have a little question about the project, because I know we're supposed to create a group on Slack, but do we include you, right, as well, because so you can see our
exactly
our work, right?
Please.
And the name of the group doesn't matter, right? It could be whatever. Really. Yeah,
whatever. I want it to be your team name. Teams tend to change their name for the first few weeks as they decide what their projects are. I've had a team change their entire project topic of like in the, what's the latest they've done it? Maybe the 8th or 9th week. They were going down a path that didn't make sense, and they were struggling to apply the different. I mean, this is exceptional, but just I wanted to tell you that things change. But as long as if you've picked something, though, the biggest problem students tend to have is they try to bite off too much. They try to, they like I think it was Sasha, maybe was Samsung or something, and I mean that's like it's too much. If you want to like a small business or medium business where you can speak directly, I prefer a live one, a real business than just you've created something. Even though I'm fine if you want to just go create something like an e-shop, or if you think there's some hole in the market that you think you could go after, and then leverage existing systems and business partners to be able to launch that effectively. But the biggest problem is usually when students try to go after a big operation and they there's just too much, and they don't narrow it down to a particular problem. But it could be a big company, but it should be like if you think about the value chain of activity, it should be in a particular department with a particular problem, and in a particular region, so that you can really get the data and zoom in on what it is that you would create and what impact you would anticipate having. Because this is where I really want to start. Most students don't understand what the hell I'm talking about until week 5 or 6. And because I'm talking about like all this tech stuff, and they're like, hey, I don't care about technology. This is a business class. Or I'm talking about business process and SWOT, and they're like, what in the hell am I doing? That's like marketing, but that's just foundational, because then it informs and directs all of the specific things you might do in e-commerce. And then I'm going to ask you, or force you to bring it all the way back around to say, if you're going to go do that, why are you going to do that? What benefit do you anticipate? And how much do you anticipate that costing? I'm not going to drag you into some costing exercise where you've got to go get bids on stuff. But you could just Google and say, generally speaking, this is how much it costs to create an application. And of course, I'm going to be a member of your teams, so I'm going to give you my own personal experiences too. So when you come to me and say, oh, I'm going to spend $2,000 on to create an app, I'm going to go, yeah, you're smoking crack. You're not. It depends on the capability that you anticipate being in that app. But yeah, you can get an app for $2,000, but an app that pings your neighbor and sends them an emoji. So whatever. The point here is that if you have, and I expect to generate this kind of business, incremental business, or solve this particular problem, and the value to me as an organization is X, Y, and Z, and these are the resources that I anticipate needing to execute that. And I'm going to force you through all of the other activities in the 5 or 6 activities. You're going to have to do the system diagram design. So you're going to say, well, what kinds of devices are you going to have to, are your users using? So what either apps or connectivity are you going to have to develop for that particular device to deliver that product or service to? And then on the back end, what kind of services are you going to need? Are you going to go buy your own servers and run them out of your office? I give you an F right away if you said yes. Or are you going to go to Amazon or Google or IBM or somebody and rent those resources? And then what kinds of services are you going to need? Email, supply chain management, ERP. I'm not going to drag you through or ask you to go through exactly all of those services that might be available. What I want you to drag yourselves through is for you to define what services do you need and why. How do they impact your idea to either leverage a strength, as you said, or shore up a weakness.
And then, but we can do the real life companies, right? Let's say if we do Apple or something, whatever, right?
You would do a real life company like?
I mean, we haven't decided yet completely. We just like theoretically speaking, like Apple, if you do this, for example.
Why would you do that? But that's what I meant by taking on a big company. Why would you do Apple? And what would you do for Apple?
I mean, we would not, but I'm just asking what, or like, how would it be? Just theoretically speaking, if you choose Apple, how much more work do you have, or like, how much does it affect you if you choose the bigger company than the smaller one?
The problem is I don't think you have access to the data. You don't know what their problems are, or what the benefits are, or what the costs are. It's huge, no matter what they do, it's huge. So, talking about millions and millions, if not billions of dollars every time they, turn a knob one way or the other, but you don't have access to the data. It's not that I don't like Apple or any large company. It's that you just don't have access to the information. And furthermore, if you pick a small business, like if one of you must know one of your family members or something, or have access to a small business that's doing something, then you can go talk to the director. You could talk to a general manager, the owner, or the founder, and you could say, what do you guys do? And what are your problems? And basically through an interview, you could ferret out what their business is, and then don't tell them, I need to know what your value chain of activities are, because they're going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Excuse me, that shouldn't say that. But you could ask them what it is that they do, and what kind of business partners that they use to create products or services that they deliver to their end users. And you could take them through SWOT and say, tell me what do you guys do well? What do you guys do poorly? What do you think the next business opportunities are? What keeps you up at night? Who do you think is going to attack you? Or what problems do you think, so you can get through the SWOT. And then when you have that amount of information, then you can work on an initiative that you'll have all the data. You're going to keep talking to them, of course, but then you could help them consider what an initiative might be to help them take the next step to become more competitive. Because that's the point. It's to create a competitive advantage. And if you do something like Apple or Samsung or some other large corporation, I find that, I mean, we can read about them, and there's plenty of case study information about them, but I've not found yet any students that can get enough information to make it a really good project.
Mm-hmm.
And the last point I would make is that when you do it for a small company, even a local Petrovini or a restaurant that has even one restaurant, not a chain, if you can do it for one little thing, then you could do it for a big company, because it's exactly the same thing. It's just the multiplier is just, times a million or a billion. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, this was great. All three of us. Well, thanks for showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you guys have any questions, of course, post them on Slack or whatever, and certainly tell your comrades to read the instructions. If I make an assignment, I think it's clear. I'm not perfect. I mean, I make mistakes, sadly, often. But so call them out when I do. But when it's clear, my things are due next week. I think that's says all it needs to say. All right. Well, have a good day. It's not a week. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Thank
You
you.
too.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you.
Ciao.
Bye.